Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming down to Gotham Sound. Welcome to our Women in Sound panel. Yes. Thank you. My name is Melissa. I work here at Gotham with Joe, who also helped us get her. We got Nick on the sound, Jared doing the camera, and we got a nice day coming up for you. We'll do some questions for the panelists first. Then I believe we'll do at least one Q&A, break in the middle, maybe another Q&A after. We have a little bin up there if you guys have comments or questions, because we do plan on doing more Women in Sound events in the future. It's tote bags, water bottles, food. Please help yourself if you haven't yet. And I'm going to hand it over to Katrina and Tracy over here, and our panelists. We got Laura, we got JT, and we've got Ash. And do a little intro too before they get started. All right.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, I'm Katrina.
I'm Tracy. We are the executive co-directors of the Women's Weekend Film Challenge, and in case you don't know what that is, we place women on crews to write, shoot, and direct a short film in one weekend. We've hosted 3 film challenges so far and have made 24 short films with over 500 women, and
They've gotten into about 60 festivals so far, and more importantly, people are hiring each other, they're referring each other, and they're getting more work from it.
Yeah.
So, and we'll be launching in LA in 2020.
Yeah. And we wanted to get involved with this event because we love finding women in sound. It's kind of hard to find them, but they are definitely out there, and we are making a home for them as well.
Yes, we have definitely found that people might say how hard it is to find women in sound, but we have found, 9 women in sound for all 9 crews over a weekend or something, so there's no excuse not to hire a woman. So without further ado, can we have our panelists come up?
Join us on. So we're going to be structuring this panel in 3 parts. The first focused on the unique experience of women in the industry. The second focused on working with peers in the industry. And the third focused on technical issues of the job. First, can we go down the line and can you give us your name, what you do, and just one of your career highlights?
Hey, I'm Laura Cunningham. I'm here representing narrative sound mixers, but I do work on a little bit of everything. And I guess a career highlight, one of the first features I mixed was called Songs My Brothers Taught Me, and I spent 6 weeks on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, and that was kind of a super cool experience. So I guess that would be a highlight for me.
Hi, I'm JT Takagi, representing documentary mixers, but I'm also, I run an organization called Third World Newsreel, and we give free seminars on different production topics, and our work is centered around nurturing filmmakers of color and other marginalized communities. A highlight in sound would be that I actually got to go to the Oscars last year for Strong Island, so.
My name is Ash Knowlton, and I'm representing post sound editors. I do production and post for a living, and I guess just this last year, I guess a highlight for me would be winning 4 Telly Awards. So that's pretty fun.
So before we ask our awesome panelists some questions, we just want to get an idea who's in the audience. So who currently works in sound? Who's here?
Raise your hands.
Oh, awesome.
That's good.
Who is aspiring to work in sound? Any producers? Any directors? Anyone else could shout out anything that you do that we haven't called? Okay, awesome.
Great. Okay, so the statistics of women in film are pretty depressing. We all know that. And the statistics specifically on women in sound are no exception. We found that women accounted for 10% of supervising sound editors in films, according to the Center for the Study of Women in Television and Film, and they comprised only 6% of sound designers. So it's definitely not 50-50. Is there why do we need to challenge the status quo in your opinions?
Well, I mean, this goes for, I think, people of all sorts of genders and races and diversities. Like, I mean, we see white men kind of owning everything. And I think once we start breaking into and representing smaller communities, it allows us to start representing people of all races and genders.
I think it's also an issue of making the industry, as well as all aspects of life, more representative of the country we live in and the world we live in.
Laura?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in particular in sound too, it'd be nice to see more women so that women feel like it's something they can do, that it is a career option for them. And just, so people feel like, yeah, I can do that too.
So far in your careers, have you found any disadvantages that have stemmed from being a woman in the field, or have there been any advantages?
Hard to say. So I think it's hard to say because it's like we live these lives and it's really hard to say that there's a disadvantage that we have because we don't know what the advantages other people have, right? So I do hear a lot though, like, oh, you're good at your job and you're a girl. It's like, oh man, that sucks. So I just wish I get a lot of opportunities being on an all-female crew, but I wish, across the board that it wasn't even a question. Like, why is there a question? Oh my God. We had the drink mixer thing and the guy was like, yeah, I hired a girl and nothing caught on fire. Yeah, so hard to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe, I don't know if you can call it an advantage, but I do get a lot of people wanting to hire me because I'm a woman specifically, because they feel like if they have young women on set that need to be wired, that they prefer to have a woman doing it, that kind of thing, which I used to feel kind of strange about it. Like, oh, I'm getting this job because I'm a woman. I'm like, okay, well, it's nice that we're having more inclusivity, but is that the reason, like, I want this job? But now I don't feel as weird about it. I feel like, well, I'm capable of doing this job. I'm qualified, so why not? If people feel that way, they'd rather have a woman because it's more, maybe we're more sensitive to women's issues as well. Like, we know what it's like to be objectified, I guess, and, we want to, maybe we are better at making women feel more comfortable. But, I mean, there are lots of men in this industry who are very sweet and very considerate as well. So, you don't have to hire a woman to make women feel comfortable, but
I think in the last few years, especially, that we're getting a lot more producers who are saying they're looking specifically, in the face of Oscar So White and things like that, that people are paying attention to these issues of race and gender, which I think is good. So, but in terms of advantage, disadvantage, I mean, the whole thing is about making things more equitable all the way around and having it more representative of the people who are being filmed. So, and that's why it's important.
A recent New Yorker article about how bias in technology contributes to the stereotypes of shrill women's voices said everything from microphones to modes of transmission have been optimized for lower voices. Have you found that the tools you use were made by men, are for men, have advantages for men? And yeah, that's the question.
Either in how they record women's voices or how you operate the equipment.
Yeah.
I don't know about the equipment so much, but I know in terms of the rigs that they have to put the equipment on, especially for that kind of things, and this goes in camera and sound, that they have tended to be more fashioned for men's frames, so it's made it harder to work with those things. But I don't know about microphones, that being a case.
yeah, harnesses. Harnesses are made for people much bigger than me. Like all my harnesses, I have them like shortened in every possible way, and they're still kind of big and bulky. And I mean, gear is heavy too. I mean, if you're a small person, you know, lifting heavy Pelican cases up and down stairs and stuff, that's an issue.
But that's why the last few years has been really great, because there's many more smaller, lighter pieces of equipment coming out. So that, I would say, has to escalate the number of women working in the field.
Are there any harnesses that you'd recommend? Any?
I've had custom, so I don't know.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I just have like an off-the-rack Orca harness, which I like.
But I was, in terms of that article, I read that too. I think all these things have to do with our socialization, right? So if we're socialized to hear, for instance, typically traditional documentaries, you have a male voice, authoritative, saying, and this is the blah, blah, blah. And so people trust that, but that's because we've been trained to listen to these things and pay attention to it. And the idea that, oh, women's voices are shrill, that's been something that's been socialized into us. It's not that they're shrill, we've been told they're shrill, so that we come to accept that. So it's part of our job to make that more normalized and have people realize, oh, no, that's not shrill, it's the guy's too low and obnoxious, and then, in fact, we need these other voices to be heard as well.
So what needs to happen to attract more women into this field and then to get those women into the higher levels of this industry?
I mean, I think this is not just like a fight that women need to fight. I think if we all were to work together on this, and just like the fact that we're all sitting here, you know, in Gotham, and there are men here who have, if we're all aware of something, we can do a lot with that information and make mountains move, you know? So, yeah, this is it.
I think also, I think you're exactly right. And the whole thing is that people get used to working with the people they know, right? So if they only know other white guys, that's who they'll tend to hire, because they don't get to encounter a lot of women working in these different fields. So the more that we have them become conscientized to the fact that, oh, it shouldn't be just your best boys with you, but there are other possibilities, and that won't impact the quality of the work. I think that helps. It also is, I think, implicit on us to, whenever we have an opportunity to offer a chance to another woman in any of those fields, that we should work harder to make that happen. And I think that goes, whether you're talking about gender or race or whatever, that people have to take extra steps, because it's very easy to sink back into, oh, well, I know this guy and I know that guy, instead of thinking, oh, but there should be I should be thinking about having my crew be more diverse in all ways. So,
yeah, I mean, I think it's encouraging, because that's happening more and more, that there are more producers who are actively looking for women or people of color to hire. I think it is, we're moving in the right direction. But yeah, and I think just the more women there are doing sound, that it'll kind of spiral, that more people see, oh no, that's like something that women can do, and it'll seem more like an opportunity for them too. So, I mean, I feel good just walking around with my gear and exposing people. Like, kids see you with your equipment, and they're, you know, then they grow up thinking, oh, well, I've seen a woman do it, you know, like, you're out there, you know, it's a possibility.
Yeah. Do you feel the pressure to be an advocate for women in film, or do you not even think about that?
I think it's our responsibility. So I think for any of us in our lives, that's your responsibility to equalize society. So, and that goes gender, race, et cetera. So,
yeah, it's definitely something I think about. And then when I got into sound, I didn't realize it would be like this. I didn't realize that it was so male dominated. And then film in general, it's kind of something that just once I got to that point, it was like, oh, this is what the field looks like. And it was a bit of a surprise, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I think about it a lot. Like, every time I go on set I mean, and sometimes you're reminded of it. People say, oh, you're the first woman I've ever seen doing sound. And I used to get that a lot when I first started, and at least that's happening less now. So I feel like, okay, there must be more women in sound. I'm not the first person you've seen. So like, it's something that I am conscious of, whether I like it or not. Like, sometimes I would prefer to just be another face in the crowd, but it just comes with the territory.
I think it's our responsibility just to be like good at our job. And then also like it just, people trust people who are good at their job. And then like I'm a woman, so I don't know, maybe now you feel like you can trust more women because I'm good at my job. I don't know.
What got you all into the sound field in the first place?
I was DJing. And I met someone who was making a film, and I watched specifically a post. I started with post. So I watched this guy do post, and I was just like, I could do that. So I just did.
I went to NYU for undergrad for film school, and I just kind of fell into sound. I was interested in post sound first, and the thing that got me interested in it was seeing student films before and after sound design. So like I took a class where I just added some basic sound design to a film, and it was like night and day. Like, it wasn't that good to begin with. It was one of my own films. It wasn't that good to begin with, but once I added sound effects and sound design and music, I thought, oh wow, I elevated it so much just by adding sound. So that's what got me interested in sound. And then I just got into production from there.
I was volunteering on crews as a free PA, and no one wanted to do sound on these ultra low budget things. So I said, well, sure, I'll blow up something, which I did, and eventually learned. And then I went back to school and took courses and things like that.
So we're going to be moving on to working with peers on set. Some background on what we do. We, on our film challenge, we create the crew, and they have a pre-production meeting. Everyone that's on the crew, from pre-production to post-production, they're all there for this pre-production meeting before the script is even written. So sometimes what happens is the sound mixer will say, okay, we're shooting on a rooftop. We can't have any dialogue there because there's the air conditioning vents and there's too much wind up there. And that's the first time the writers are ever thinking about recording sound in the first place. And the feedback that we hear quite often is, it's so nice to have the sound mixers involved in the pre-production, and we didn't even realize that that's rare. So do you find that it is rare to be included in the planning, and do you think that it is necessary? Do you wish people were thinking about sound from the get-go?
Yeah, it's rare. It's really hard because we're low budget indie films, so it's really hard to get people to prioritize who they're thinking of, and majority of the time it's either like it's camera. People are thinking about camera, and they're not wondering what the problems are for sound. And most of the time I hear, we'll fix it in post. So there's that.
Yeah, when I mix narrative indie features, the most I'm involved is tech scouts. So basically, locations have already been chosen, and you're just there to go see how good or how bad they are for sound. And it's possible sometimes you get them to change locations, or you get them to do things before you get there on the day that can help you. But a lot of times, yeah, it is just a fix it in post mentality, which is really unfortunate. I mean, in production, obviously, every department has their own budget, and they're only looking after their own department, their own budget. But it would be nice if there was more of a holistic idea of, say, hey, if we gave locations a little bit more money so that we could maybe close this location for the day, that would maybe be cheaper than doing ADR for this entire scene. So it'd be nice if there was a little bit more thought that goes into distributions of budget and those kinds of issues. But yeah, unfortunately, it's a learning process for some people in the indie world as well.
And like when we're in low budget indie, time is money. So it's like, oh, cool, you picked a location underneath an airfield. That's great. Do you want to hold every 5 minutes for playing? You know, and then, you know, your post budget is like, you know, $500. So you're not getting ADR. Sorry.
I'd say on docs where especially music and stuff is involved, there's a lot of pre-production discussion about how to handle situations. And on interview ones, I'm very thrilled when the production is kind enough to send me photos and descriptions of potential locations, and occasionally on scale so that we can actually choose. And so, but that's not typical.
So what are some of the gaps in knowledge that you've encountered when working with other people on crew, and what do you wish people who are not in sound knew about what you do?
I think, for one thing, for people to be more aware of sound, and I know it's very hard, but often director and producers will scout a location without the sound department, and they'll say, it's quiet. Because they walked in, they saw how pretty it looked, they were there for about a minute, and then they left, and then, oh, there's construction across the street, oh, there's an elevator that rings every 5 seconds. So it's great when you have producers that are thinking about that when they're scouting locations. So that's one thing that I would hope for. I think the other thing that I found the more really good call sheets with really good tech specs listed out that say what kind of files they want. They have all the information both for both camera and sound, how they want the folders labeled and things like that. Makes life so much easier, especially on docs where they're shooting in one city one day and another city another day, and they may have different crews. That way you have a consistency throughout the production.
Yeah. Oh, I guess, yeah. It's just like knowing, like, it's half of your film. Like, it's 50% of your film. So you can't ignore it, you know? And if you do ignore it, you're really jeopardizing all of the money you're throwing and time and, you know, that you're putting into this film. It's a waste of money and time to not think about sound.
Do you have any advice or tips to share with the audience on how to advocate for your department if you feel like you're working with a producer that just doesn't want to spend the money or time on sound?
I guess just don't be afraid to voice your opinion. I think it's hard sometimes in the sound department because it is easy to kind of throw sound under the bus, to be worrying about camera first, worrying about so many other things first. So a lot of times if you bring up issues, it might be difficult and people might not want to hear it. But I would just say don't be afraid to say what you're thinking. And then at least if they know all these issues going into the shoot, and if maybe they didn't address them anyway, but then at least at the end of the day, maybe they've learned something and it won't be your fault either because you've brought them up. So I would say, first of all, just, you know, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself and don't be afraid to bring things up and bring things to people's attention.
That goes on set too. Like when you go into a location, and let's say it was a location that you didn't get to scout. Well, you can't hear anything because everyone's setting up. It's just like a lot of noise. So the only way you can hear it is to actually ask the AD or whoever's in charge to call for silence so that you could actually hear what the problems are going to be, and then you can address them. And then if they aren't addressed, you can also have people listen on the headsets to what they're going to get so they understand, oh, maybe we should work at turning off that generator or something like that.
So this leads up into our next question, which is, what are some of the battles that you have to fight in production to make it easier for post-production? And if you're in post, what are some things that would make life easier for you if it were done in production?
Wild sounds. Foley. I mean, on the, you know, Foley is tough. It takes so long to get. Making footsteps in snow is really rough. Like, that's a hard thing to do. But if you had just taken the time to record footsteps in snow while you were in the snow, That would, you know what I mean? It's just wild sounds. Scheduling that in and leaving a bit of wiggle room for production sound.
Yeah, I mean, making things easier for post. I mean, the biggest thing I think of is just controlling the environment, controlling what's happening, so that you have the cleanest possible sound. Like if there's extras moving through the background and things like that, controlling that kind of noise, or I don't know.
What was the craziest noise that you've had to deal with as you're trying to record sound?
Oh my gosh. There's this director, I love her so much, Grace Kim. I don't know if you've ever, she handed me a film once and it was so beautiful, but they didn't have a onboard mic on their camera and they didn't have sound. So recreating the entire film, that was rough. It was like, she was like putting lipstick on the mirror and I was like, I don't even know what this sounds like. What is this? How do you Foley, what you can't hear, or you know what I mean? So that was rough. Yeah. There's no specific thing about that film that was hard. It was just like the whole thing. It's like no sound.
I don't know. I've been in so many bad situations. I'm trying to like pick one out. But one that was really frustrating recently was I was shooting in a bowling alley, and we were doing close-ups on the characters' faces, and then without discussing it, the AD had all the extras start bowling, even though they were out of frame. I was like, "What's going on?" I had to have a conversation, and he was saying, "Oh no, the director thinks it's better for performance because it makes it seem more real." And then I talked to the director, and she said, "Oh no, it's fine. No, they don't need to be doing that." So that kind of thing happens. I don't know why it happens. I don't know, where these ideas come from, but sometimes you just have to talk to people and tell them they're being crazy, that this is not necessary and it's kind of ruining this, but I don't know.
I think I've been in places where we're trying to do an interview and there's trees nearby that are filled with flocks of birds that are chirping. So the only way you can get them to quiet is to, off the record, throw stones at them so that they'll fly away. Wow. But then you have to have someone do that. So.
Women in sound. Stones at birds. Jeez. So can you describe the ideal workflow for production sound and leading into post?
Sound reports. Sound reports should just get passed as soon as you're done. You're handing off this cover sheet or sound, whatever your workflow looks like, but it should be very clearly laid out what track is what. So by the time it gets to post, when I'm organizing a timeline that the editor had, they keep it the same. Like track 1 is boom, track 2 is love, track 3 is love 2, and then it gets checkerboarded in that way on the timeline. Once it gets to post, though, if the editor doesn't understand that there's a really clear reason why these tracks are this way, it gets all shifted around. And it's a really hard. You spend an entire day selecting mics that it should be a breeze. So sound reports and cover sheets should just be passed down the whole way. Oh, also on there should be track take 35 is wild sounds of footsteps, and then that also gets passed along extra recordings. Yeah, should all be on the sound report though.
Yeah, metadata is important, labeling all your tracks. I had a dialogue editor email me recently, and he said oh, I'm dialogue editing for that film you mixed. Thank you so much for labeling your tracks. He said the last film I worked on, every track was labeled track A, track B, track C, track D. So he was and then I saw yours and you had character names and it was great. So yeah, I mean, as much information as you can give post, the better, so that they're not just randomly trying to figure out what's what.
Yeah, I believe in sound notes, and also on a doc, it's sometimes hard to do that, but when you're able to say right after take, we missed a slate, so you can use the car door slam to sync that up, and now we're going to do, this is wild track of blah blah blah, or that was wild track of blah blah blah, and that makes it easier for post to be able to pull those things out. And speaking of wild track, you want to get a lot of it. of all kinds. So especially depending on what kind of film you're doing, a doc film at least, if you're in a particular neighborhood, besides the person you're interviewing, it's what's the sound of the neighborhood. Maybe the subject sings. Maybe we should get extra wild track of that person singing. Anything that will help later for them to enrich the track, even if at that moment in time it wasn't something that you were necessarily filming. But you know the topic of the film, you know it's about this character, and so you want to help post build up the sound of the area of the person, things like that. Especially if you leave town and you're in a foreign place. They won't be able to come back there necessarily to get all this stuff. So you have to, and you may have to negotiate with production. Say, you know, there's a market that we're going to be filming in. I think you should give me some time where I can just go around getting different sounds in the marketplace that you might be able to use later.
Yeah, like they're not going to know that they need to give you time for these things. Yeah, you have to let them know, oh yeah, if you want me to record ambiences here, you need to give me time to do that. Like, yeah, in a normal production schedule, you don't have time. Like sometimes if it's like a documentary and cameras doing B-roll, you can step aside and do some ambiences as well. But yeah, like kind of fitting the wild tracks into the day. And then if you need to ask for time to do those things. Yeah.
Yeah, on the sound devices, I use the 633 a lot. But on the sound devices, there is a notes thing, and you can put in, sometimes I get really quiet scenes where I'm like, this could be used for room tone. So I make a note of it, and that gets put in the generated sound report that the sound devices machine can generate. Yeah.
Do you find room tone useful?
Room tone? Yeah. I mean, unless you use isotope. Because isotope is really cool because you can create, I mean, it's not the best, but you can recreate an ambience. But room tone is helpful, especially when editors go in and cut on dialogue. And sometimes you get, you know, an OMF that's been cut and you don't have handles, or the handles have like directors speaking or ADs speaking, you know, you don't have a silent moment. And so, yeah, room tone's the best.
So get room tone.
Room tone, yeah. Yeah. And then like I said, I mark, you know, pretty silent tracks. Sometimes I'm like, oh, there was like 10 seconds of like useful silence here.
But yeah, if you don't label it and if post can't find it, like they're never going to use it. So yeah, you have to make sure you can't just keep rolling off stuff and it's take 1, take 2, take 3, you know, make sure that, you know, oh, and you can make a note, or maybe also verbally slating helps too. Like this is wild track, birds. But yeah, if you make a note of it, then they can see it and they can say, oh yeah, I needed, you know, cars passing, and here it is, here's a track with cars passing. But yeah, so make sure, because they're not going to necessarily dig through every single track you record, but if you label everything out, then they can pull what they need.
And you can make separate notes to give to them also, then they'll have it.
It seems like you guys are really thorough and thoughtful. Are there any more thorough and thoughtful than some of your peers? Are there any inherent character traits that you have that you think make you good at your jobs?
With production, I started with post. So I was working from really not ideal production sound. So going into production, I knew, okay, well, in post, I'm going to need this, you know, or someone will, you know, if it's not me doing the post. Yeah, but when you're in post and you're getting handed off something from production, I don't see I don't know. It's hard to make people think of you. Especially, I think like doing both jobs is so beneficial because you know, well, that's not going to sound good, you know, or that can't be cleaned. Like air conditioners can't be cleaned, but sirens can, you know, I don't know. Yeah, stuff like that.
It's probably a good idea for people to at least visit post so that you have an idea of what, on set, often people will say something like, we can fix it in post. And maybe you can't. And maybe it's not worth trying to fix it when you could actually fix it on set.
Yeah, I mean, I usually never have a conversation with post. Like I can't really think of projects where I was talking to post. So yeah, if you know outside of, you know, of an individual project what post needs, because you're probably not going to have that conversation. Yeah, I think the more you know what they need from you, the better, because they're not going to tell you. You're not going to hear from them probably.
For those who are starting their careers, how do you balance doing favors for friends with just the need to pay rent and the need to build up your, your experience?
This one's really rough. I have so many thoughts on this, but I don't know like what the right thing is to say. Okay, so commercial gigs, there's a rate, and like we all have to kind of stick to it, and like we undercut each other, and then we lose our rates, and so now we're fighting over like $500 that doesn't even pay for a kit and labor. You're on set for 12 hours and you just had $200, which is like less than minimum wage, or maybe it is minimum wage. But like anyway, so I think with commercial gigs, we should just stick to our rates as best as we can and not undercut each other. And then these like the free, the friend rate narrative projects, yeah, those are where you can wiggle room your kit and your time, and because they're passion. I mean, low budget indie is, I hope isn't just paying your rent. Like, I don't know. It's not paying mine. Yeah.
But also, if you are just starting out and you're doing favors for friends, I mean, for people's self-funded projects, for these low-budget projects, every project you do leads to other jobs. So if you're just trying to get experience and just trying to meet people, you meet every job you do, you meet several people, and those people might remember you for the next job. So even though you might be doing a favor for a friend and working for a really low rate, if you are trying to network, it is a good thing for you as well. So, but no, I agree that don't do a favor for something that should be a full rate job. Like if they have a budget, if it's, something commercial, then they should be paying you full rates.
I would also say that, I mean, if there's a lot of projects that you should do for passion that will eventually, I've been on some films that took 10 years to finish, but at the end of the 10 years, it's a really good film. And so you have to sort of think, is this a film that I want to be invested in because I believe in it? And that gives you the wiggle room to figure out, well, how can I make this work? And that might mean that you negotiate your rate, but it also might mean that there's some other trade-offs that you can do in terms of people's services to you and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, Women's Weekend Challenge. Oh my God, that exploded my network. That was crazy. And it was just like, and then you get your commercial gigs and you get your narrative gigs and the doc stuff. You get it all from this like pot of, melding pot of people. Women's Weekend Challenge is great. Shout out.
We paid her.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So, but yeah, the commercial stuff is, stick to it.
Are there any college students in the audience? Awesome. So what advice would you share with these college students? What should they be doing before they graduate to prepare them for the job?
You work on all the student films because on student films, there's no payback. Let's say if you did screw up, you will survive that. But once you leave school, you will not survive that. So it's a good place to get your experience. Plus, these are the people you are going to work for after you get out of school. So.
Yeah, so true. Like I know this guy, and he was telling me this story about Lena Dunham. Who are these other like really famous like directors now? Anyway, they were all doing student thesis films, and he was saying, "No, I'm not going to do that. You're not paying my rate." Blah blah blah. And now Lena Dunham is Lena Dunham, and it's like, oh, you could have just worked with her, and now so that But also, I didn't go to school for this stuff, so there's so much more to learn than what is in school. They're going to teach you this technical stuff, but it's all about who you're meeting and what you're getting out of the people that you're meeting, the type of quality relationships you build. It's really important.
You could also intern at Gotham.
So we're going to move into the last part of the Q&A, or the last part of the panel, which is about the technical issues. So if you are building your basic kit for the first time, what should you make sure to own and what's okay to rent?
I think basic kit is just recorder, boom, 2 lavs. And with that kit, you can do maybe 90% of jobs. So if you're buying your first kit, I would say that's what you should try to get.
Agreed.
Yeah, maybe a hop. A hop saved my life. Like scratch audio saves my life because it's just like you want post to have something to sync with. And if you don't have scratch audio, you're kind of hoping that the camera department has their internal mics turned on. It's just like just throw a hop on there. Yeah.
Do you have any tips for slating or any disaster stories you'd like to share?
I mean, I guess push for a head slate and not a tail slate. Everyone always forgets at the end of the take. Like you call out tail slate, but the camera's already cut. But also, I mean, if you have a hop, if you have time code, it's not the end of the world. Like slate,
audio.
With slates, but
You can like get away with like Pluralize works pretty cool, where you can just like the scratch audio will sync up with whatever the mixer has recorded, and the editor will just sync up, and I don't know the waveforms, and then they sync up. Yeah,
That only works if the camera has decent enough audio to
Scratch.
use it. So yeah, so that's
scratch.
key because I hear people often saying, "Oh, we'll just sync it up and pluralize," and then come back later and say, "We couldn't because the camera audio wasn't turned on."
Well, that's sound's job. That's a rough one because like sometimes something happens in the middle of the day, but it is your job to like continuously check on that camera. Like the sound is still your problem, even if it's on the camera.
Sound and time code.
But yeah, if you have scratch going into camera, if you have time code, I like having both because one might fail on you or, one might not work. But then if you have both, then it's kind of foolproof. Not always.
What are some techniques, tips, and tricks for getting good sound both during wide and tight shots on set?
I mean, so wide and tight at the same time sex. I guess the best ways is just have a good long shotgun mic that can pick up from far away, combined with wiring your characters, combined with stash mics, plant mics, if you can hide a mic somewhere. But yeah, I guess those are my best suggestions, but it is kind of it sucks. I don't like wide and tight at the same time.
Oh, it's a wide and a tight at the same time?
That's
Why
what
would they
you
do
mean,
that?
right?
Yes.
Sure.
Like
Where are we? Are we
two
on
camera.
like a talk show?
Or just any two camera, because sometimes some like narrative features, they do two camera and they do a wide, in their coverage, they do the tight coverage at the same time as the wide.
On board.
4K, they're shooting all of us at once. And
Whoa.
if we didn't have these mics, we'd be in trouble.
On-board camera on the tight one would be my option. Well, yeah, but all of your things, but then also on-board camera and lav them correctly.
If you hear a sound disturbance during the recording, do you recommend going through with the scene, or are you the type that calls out and stops filming? What do you think is the best approach?
You're not the director. My thing is always look at the AD, make eye contact with the AD, or try to signal that something just happened. But I don't screw around with the director or the talent. It's my I'm scared of them. Don't. Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely a conversation you should have with the director beforehand. And it is a case-by-case basis. So, sometimes a director is totally fine and they say, you have a subject that can repeat that answer again and again and again. And the director just says, if there's an issue, just let me know. We'll stop it in the middle. But sometimes you're dealing with something more sensitive. Maybe you have someone who's telling a traumatic story. You're not going to shout in the middle of them telling that story that there's a plane going by. So, I mean, it's definitely a case-by-case basis. It's a director preference. Just have that conversation beforehand. But then all those things, if you can, silently signal that there's an issue to the AD or to the director, that's kind of a good way. And then if they know there's an issue, then they can make the decision to press on anyway. Oh, maybe this is an answer that I don't need for the edit, so I don't care that there's a plane going by right now.
Yeah, just discussion beforehand. And you have to position yourself so you can see someone to make that signal to. So I'm usually going. And then the director saying, "What's wrong with it?" No. And hopefully
learn
they
sign
realize
language.
something's going on.
I've like texted the ADs before. I guess it depends. Like if you're sitting and mixing, if you're not, booming. But if you're like able to like sit and your boom is on like a stand or something, it's like a talking head type interview. I text the AD, be like, car, I don't know.
How do you communicate your notes on each take?
633. You can like make notes on the sound devices. I think most mixers have some sort of function like that, unless you're using like a WENT and an H4 or something weird. But like most of the mixers now have capability where you can like make notes, like good, not good, or like get more specific with it. Otherwise, like old school, just write on a piece of paper, like take 3, there was a car. Yeah.
Yeah, and if your recorder can't do it straight into the recorder, there are apps you can get for your phone if you don't want to have to do. But I definitely have done the old school, just making notes, writing notes down. But yeah, then there are apps, and then there's like sometimes if it's like if I'm more of a sit down situation, some recorders you can just plug a keyboard into and literally just type your notes in. And I know Sound Devices has an app too.
Yeah, I
like
don't
the
think it
Wave
works on Android, the Wingman.
Wingman, yeah, Wingman, and you
Only
can
iPhone. It's so annoying. Everything's for iPhone. Oh, also Scripty. You can like tell Scripty if there is a Scripty for narrative stuff. Yeah.
I'm old school. I keep a little notepad. Sometimes I write on my hand. So, especially if it's sometimes in a take, someone has noise just on one word, and it's not worth getting the whole thing done over. But you say, there was a bang on the word going. So could we just get some wild track of the person to say going like 4 times? But you would only remember that if you had made note of that during the take. So.
How many memory cards do you bring on set with you?
A bunch. It depends on what mixer you use, but I believe there's like backups on most mixers. But the 633 has a CF and an SD. So my CF is my backup and has basically like a bunch of different things. But then I have like a billion SD cards because something might happen. It's very rare, that something actually does happen to it. But yeah, I have a bunch, like 8 SDs, which is nothing compared to camera department. But for sound, it's like a big deal.
Yeah, but for a single day of shooting, I try not to use more than 1 card because you just want to dump once at the end of the day, and dealing with more cards than that I find annoying. But yeah, I just have a bunch just in case you pop one in and you have an issue with it. You always want to have backups. But I mean, we're sound and we usually don't run out of space, so space is usually not an issue. But I just have some 32 gig and some 64 gig, and I would never use an entire card in a day.
And they're cheap, so you might as well have extra.
How long should you hold on to backups?
I hold on to my personal. I hold on to everything, like post and production. But I work with Silver Sound, so we have years worth. We don't get rid of anything, so everything's always there. But on my own personal like cards, I'll delete it as soon as it goes into our archives, as long as it's there.
I keep it till the film's released. I keep it back up on my home drive. So.
Yeah, like I usually keep something till the project's finished, till they finished editing it. But then for my own archives, if I recorded ambiences or things that I like, I'll keep those forever.
People do come back to you like 2-3 years later and say, "Do you remember that day when we were? Do you have those tracks?"
Yeah, I've had directors, and I've sent the same files to directors more than one time. So just because you sent it to them 3 months later doesn't mean they're not going to lose it again and might need you to resend it.
So you mentioned wild sound quite a bit. Are there any tips for recording wild sound, and how do you make sure that you get time to record that?
If it's a narrative situation, I tell the AD as soon as I know I need a line wild, and then we just do it when they've finished doing coverage for the scene. if it's, I guess if it's like other stuff, if it's like ambiances and things, I guess that's a little more flexible. But
It depends on what it is that you're getting well check of. Some people like to have it in stereo, and some people, if you're doing very specific effects, then you can use a very directional mic and just pick up those elements. And sometimes it means controlling an area too. So like if you're doing that marketplace, you might have to ask some of the other market people to quiet down so you can just get this person's yell and then that person's yell, and then you get everyone yelling. So
I've always had a problem getting wild sound on set. We never have time. There's never time, like the schedule's not built for wild sound, and they're like, "Oh, you're like holding everyone up." And it's like, so I mean, I just do it on my own. Like, "Oh, I needed that door slam or sliding or whatever." Just do it. Do it whenever there's a moment there's, I don't know, they're setting up in the front yard and you were in the backyard. Just go to the backyard and just do it real quick. You don't need permission. Just like don't interrupt production. Yeah. Hard to say.
yeah, if it's not room tone or wild lines, then yeah, I try to do it on my own time somewhere, sneak it in somewhere. Like, I usually don't make people hold because I want.
Yeah, like, can you hold? We need your breaths.
Yeah, or something, yeah, because especially if you ask for a lot, then they don't want to give you everything. So you need to just, the things that you absolutely need, you need that character saying that one thing, make sure you can get those things. But yeah, you can't ask for too much.
Thank you. So we have time for a couple audience questions. Does anyone have a question for any of the panelists?
And while you're thinking of questions, we're just going to mention that after this, there's going to be drinks at Sunswick. You can get your drink tickets at the front as you're heading out. So I saw one hand go up in the back.
Forgive me if this was already mentioned because I got here late. I was just wondering, as women, how do you maintain your body to be able to carry all the gear and the booming all day without being in excruciating pain?
Ride the subway and don't hold any of the poles. Just hold the ceiling.
Just hold a boom on the subway all the time.
So I've done a lot of physical therapy. My body is asymmetrical because I only boom on one side. So yeah, it's a constant struggle, at least for me personally. But I did have a physical therapist that helped me with my posture, and I told her, this is what I'm doing with my gear, and she helped me kind of, where I should distribute weight and, ways I can do it where I'm not going to like destroy myself. But yeah, and then also just going to the gym helps. Anything you can do to help to stay like fit and strong. But yeah, I would say it's a lot, but just try not to do anything you don't have to do. Like, don't have the bag on if you don't need to have the bag on. Take breaks when you can have breaks. And also, if I usually don't run around with a huge heavy bag full of lots of wireless. I'm sure for some people it's unavoidable, but if there's a situation where I need to have a huge bag, I tell them I need a boom operator or I need an assistant, because I don't want to destroy myself. Like, I know people who've been in the industry for a long time and have serious back problems, so.
I think that's in all departments that there is a physical payback, but that's why I believe heavily in production assistants who can carry cases like that. And also now that there's smaller and lighter recorders, and you have things like smaller and lighter microphones too, that this is all has to be helpful. Core exercises help.
Over there?
I have a unique sort of story and a unique question related to that
Do
question.
you want the microphone?
Sure. Thank you. Hi, TJ. So my story is that when I got into sound, I got into it because I was actually taught by two professional women who were basically, I was going back and forth as a boom op between the two mixers who were working primarily in the city all the time. They don't work in the city anymore. They retired from sound, but so I'm thankful to them. And so I have a question to you, panelists, and anyone else who's in the audience who's working professionally, is that would you be able and willing to take on women, people of color, who want to just get into the field? And if so, then I have lots of students I can throw at you. Two right here. And we come, I teach at Brooklyn College. I teach primarily sound production. And so we have lots of students who are very interested in this field, and they're hungry to learn.
I am. I'm always trying to bring new people in. It is a little rougher, going on low budget narrative stuff, even commercial stuff. You're like, hey, I'd like to bring someone. They're like, oh, we have to feed them. Like, how much is this going to cost us? It's an uphill battle in that way, but I'm always open to helping and, teaching people in the studio. I worked with Nicole that way. It was like 11 p.m. at my house. Like, all right, this is like what you do. Yeah. So yeah, totally.
I'm open to it, but tends to be hard in documentaries because they usually want to keep the set fairly small. On the other hand, what I also suggest is whenever we've had PAs, if the person says, I really want to assist that department, they're often accommodated to be able to do that, and then that works out well for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think on some sets it is hard to just bring an additional person, but even if they're just observing. But yeah, I mean, yeah, working as a PA and then connecting with the departments that you are interested in is a great way.
Yeah, I also, there's so many jobs that I get asked to do that I just can't do all of them, so I'm always trying to pass them off. Like Nicole Maupin here is great. I love her. But it was just like a few gigs I can't do. And then I was just like, all right, I'm going to teach you how to use a 633 now. And like, you're going to go on set tomorrow. And that's how, it worked. Yeah.
I learned so much, and now I have a 633.
We've also have some opportunities during the Women's Weekend Film Challenge. It's all professional filmmakers, but some people who have less experience in sound and want to get more have the opportunity to be a boom op and learn from a more experienced sound mixer, or get on set as a PA and learn that way. And yeah.
You had a question. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. So I have multiple questions. Thank you. So I have multiple questions, but I'm just going to keep it at 2 right now. So my first is, I found that in my experience, like recording sound on set, excuse me, camera and lighting equipment, especially lower end equipment, tends to have like a constant noise and hum. So my question is, how do you work around that if you've come across that issue?
That's
First
rough.
question.
There's some sort of tenting you can do with like sound blankets. What are they? It might be the Astrolites. They just have this like weird electrical buzz going through them. And it's very hard to clean in post. That's something that it runs in so many frequencies that it's very, very hard to clean. You'll destroy your dialogue by doing that. So sometimes, like, if it's not like kicking on and off, it sometimes just works in the scene. And then you could go in and clean like the worst parts of it. Otherwise, you can ask for it to be like, sometimes if they have extra cabling, you can bring it around to another room, or, tent it off with sound blankets. Things can get kind of dangerous that way, though. Fires and stuff. It's rough.
I'm a big fan of sound blankets, creating some kind of tent. If there's a ballast, to have it ask for extra feeder cables so they can move it to another area. And sometimes some productions seem to think, that the computer and people doing the car transfer should be in the same room. No, they should be somewhere else. Same thing with charging batteries and all that.
Yeah, like I had this like one scene where it was like so quiet in the scene, but then our AD was sitting there typing with these long fingernails. I was like, what are you doing? And I just kept looking at her like, stop.
Yeah, I guess if it's a ballast, just be careful you don't make it overheat, because that happens. If you start tenting it, just make sure it has venting. But you can work with your gaffers, and they can help you out with that to make sure you're tenting it in a way that you're also not going to make it die.
Okay, and then this sort of second question, I'm going to try to combine it into two, or two into one rather. So my first is, when you're recording wild lines in particular, do you find it hard to like work with the actors? Because I find that they're always like ready to run off after a scene, and it's hard for me to record lines with them immediately after recording a scene. And then also, this is kind of another question, but with room tone, do you tend to record with the lavs on and on the bodies of the actors at the same time?
When you're doing wild lines, you mean, with the lavs and the boom? Yeah. Keep it the same. And also, it's not your job to grab talent. Like, you've got to communicate to your AD or your director. Whoever's running the show needs to be your voice. Because, like, stay as neutral as possible. I literally go to the AD for everything that's their job. Like, just to cross platform, to cross departments, use the AD. And like, yeah, I don't talk to talent. I mean, I talk to them, they're cool, like whatever, but like, use your AD.
Over. Okay. I don't know. There's a lot of questions, I think.
My question is, have you ever find out that you got paid lower than men, and how do you handle the situation? Do you turn down a job, or you prove that you're like, or like you accept it and you prove that you are good at your job and you deserve a higher pay, or like do you negotiate with them?
So for me, for every job, when you're freelance, you negotiate your rate for every single job. So it would be difficult for me to find out if they were paying a man. Like on the last shoot, they paid a sound mixer who was a man more money. Like I wouldn't really find that out. So I guess you can only speculate if they, I guess there's statistics out there where they say that, people offer men more money for the same job and women aren't as successful in negotiating for rates. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, just every single job, you just need to stick to your guns when you're negotiating your rates. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't know on any job I've done if they were paying men more.
I have a question for recording and metadata. Does Post look at the microphones that are being used, or for ADR?
They should. It should be in your cover. I sent out cover sheet basically stating like what lavs I've used, what boom mic I used. But when you are doing ADR, like it is massively harder to try and match audio from like, I could get nerdy about it, but like, yes, you want to try and use the shotgun, the boom mic, the lav. If you want to go to that extra step, you want to use the same mics.
Yeah, in my sound reports, I generally list out the mics that I'm using so that they know. I have had Post reach out to me and ask me what mics I was using, and I'm assuming it's for that reason, that they wanted to match it.
Do you have any tips on labeling? Like when you have everything on and like something happens, I know you can like have preset labels in there, but I'm still getting used to like turning the knob and like getting every single like letter in there. And I don't know if you have any tips on that.
Are you talking about the 633?
Yeah. Right. I have a Zoom F8, but also I've worked with the sound devices. It's like this similar.
They have apps. And I know that the 633 has like a Bluetooth keyboard. I haven't worked with the I've worked with the F8, but like actually when I worked with the F8, I was like, this labeling thing is so hard. I'm not even going to do it.
I have so much trouble with it.
I stopped using it. Yeah. But I know that's like awful to say because Zoom actually did make it so that it's accessible and should be easier to use. But no, I just was like, no, I'm going to sound devices. But there's apps. There's apps and Bluetooth keyboards.
Yeah, or I just try to keep it simple as possible. Like if I'm on a documentary and we're not labeling things per se, so it's just up to me to differentiate. Like I'll just label something based upon maybe location. If we're going to be in a park and then we're doing something else and something else, I'll just write park. So just so they have something to go off of. But also in that situation, if you have scratch and time code going to camera, then it's also easy for them to just sync stuff up. And the labels don't matter as much, but it still helps the editor. So I just try to keep it really, really simple and something that makes sense to me. And then hopefully it's something that makes sense to post. But this is if you don't have, like sometimes they'll tell you, this is how we want to be labeling things. And, so this is a situation in which there is none of that. And it's just up to me to make something that makes sense.
I did a whole feature on a Zoom F8 and I didn't label anything. And we got up to what is it, take 72 of something. And it's oh, good luck in post going through any of that and trying to find, because you couldn't change the scene. I was just the F8 makes it so impossible to change scene numbers or.
Yeah, that's the problem I have with it.
Yeah, so I got up to take 72 and they're what take are we on? I'm 72. And they're no. So yeah, you figure it out. Zoom, they fixed it. I don't even know if there was ever a problem. It just was so hard. I was I don't like this. Yeah.
Your fallback is that you at least audio select it and you put a note somewhere.
Take 72 is actually scene 5. Take 3.
Hi. I know networking is one of your strongest tools when finding jobs and everything. But with finding jobs online, how's it been, I guess, going out and finding out about a sound job online and you don't know anything about it or you're not familiar with the company or anyone that's working with it? Do you have experience just going out there, I guess, putting yourself out there in a new gig that you don't know about?
All the time. Yeah, well, that was how I built my network. The Facebook groups, if no one knows about them, there's tons of them. There's NYC 911 filmmakers. There's women in film NYC. There's so many of them, and they're always posting jobs. The only problem with them is that they're really good to build your reel, to get some experience, and they're mainly looking for people who are trying to build their experience because they're not offering full rates. But yeah, just do it and get the feel for people. If people are weird, then don't do it. You know what I mean? Yeah. But most of them, they're pretty legit. They're real, and they're posting, so people have some sort of self-check where they're I'm not going to post something just to abduct this person. You know what I mean? Is that weird? That was weird.
I would say make sure you get as much information as you can. Maybe get the person's company's address or something like that, because you don't know who they are and then they decide not to pay you, you can't even go to small claims court if you don't have someone's address. So I would say that would be one thing to cover yourself, is make sure you know as much about this person as possible. If they have a production company and a website, that's much more legitimate than if they're just some random person. But there are plenty of people who are self-funding their own films and they don't, they have a day job and they don't have a production company and they're still going to be trustworthy and treat you well and pay you. So, that's not necessarily a marker of, who's going to be decent or not. But I would just say maybe put limits on it. Tell them, I'll do that rate for a 12-hour day. Because if you don't specify, sometimes you'll be working for $100 and then it's, hour 20 and you're still there. So I would just say, maybe try to put some limits on it so that you aren't, killing yourself for a low rate, things like that.
Yeah, I would say no to. I never looked for a job on Craigslist. That's weird. But yes to Facebook. I don't know. They always end up being cool. I don't know. Facebook ones are fine, I think. Have you ever had a problem with a Facebook gig? Have you ever done a gig on Facebook?
I haven't done any of those. I'm a member of a lot of those groups, but I don't think I've ever actually done a job off of one of them.
They're exactly like what they seem. They're just a bunch, and they're always the craziest shoots too. Oh, we're gonna climb on this roof and light something on fire, and a car's gonna go. And it's you have $1,000 to shoot this film.
Thank you.
I would Google whoever you're thinking of working with, and if you absolutely don't know and no one else knows them, you might consider having some kind of deal where you get paid end of that week or something like that.
Oh yeah, or have a basic contract. Just being and have them fill it out with their info. And then at least you have something in writing too. Yeah, always get things in writing too, if it's over email.
That was
Truth.
Oh yeah, and don't put yourself in bad situations. Like if they're like, "Oh yeah, we're driving and you need to climb into the trunk to mix." Like, don't do stuff like that.
Oh, I do it all the time. I have so many pictures of me in trunks mixing. But really cool situations, like the last one was in the back of a Tesla, like mini SUV, whatever. It was so cool. They're like, there's no room for you. I'm like, it's all right. I really like the trunk. I'll figure this out.
I think we had a question over here.
Okay. Last year or 2 years ago, there was a new law passed regarding freelance work, and it provided like a draft of a contract that you guys could take and amend as necessary. Do you guys take contracts to every job, or do you sign employment agreements provided by the employer?
Deal memo.
Depends. No.
I send out a deal memo to everyone. Just recently, someone said no to a deal memo, and I was like, that's weird. Why? Like, what are you trying to do? Like, are you trying to, like, stiff me on hours? Are you trying to get me to work overtime without actually being, like, responsible for this or something? Deal memos. Deal memos are just, like, a good way for everyone to be on the same page. Like, hey, I'm going on set. I'm bringing this gear. You're responsible for it if anything happens. I'm only working this amount of hours. If it goes past this, you pay me overtime. Deal memo. And everyone's supposed to feel good about that. Like there'd be like, okay, this is what I get you for, and this is what you get from me. Yeah.
Yeah, like so that there's no surprises on their end or on your end. That everything's like clearly written out so everyone understands what the terms are. But yeah, I don't necessarily I like to get all that stuff in writing, but I don't necessarily have a contract or a deal memo for every single job. But I just make sure to have everything in an email at least. But if it's a longer job, yes. Or if it's overseas, yes, I have everything written out. Like I once didn't do a feature in Nigeria because they didn't agree to my deal memo that said that they were responsible if anything happened to the equipment. And I was like, okay, cool. I can't fly to Nigeria with tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment and not have, production promise that they're going to take care of the equipment. So it just, for me, it depends on the job.
I think you'll find also when you work for larger companies, they provide you with the deal memo. It's like 10 pages long. So, but a minimum, like a paragraph or so would be good so you at least know what you've signed up for.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for the insight so far. It's been otherworldly. Thank you, truly. My question is, I want to touch back with what we talked about the holistic approach to bringing sound department into the pre-production. Just if you have any more advice from the director, or you could, I guess, advise directors what they can do to make production more equitable, inclusive, collaborative from pre-production. Any more insights to that?
I'm directing my first short, and it's definitely thinking of all the departments is my job. So it's when you're setting up, if you're doing a build or a pre-light, when you're thinking about camera, you're thinking about lights, you're thinking about art, you're thinking about all of these things. It just is so easy to just send sound an email asking if they also have any concerns, especially if there's a pre-light day. I would love to have a pre-sound day so I can just do a scout if there's possibility for me to stash a mic somewhere or whatever the case. Majority of the time, they're already thinking about production in this huge, gigantic way. So just ask sound. They're not going to waste your time. They're also not going to waste their time. If they're like, no, this is pretty simple, they'll just say that.
I think the other part of it is, it's part of making people feel that they're part of a team and they're working on a project that everyone has invested in. And so the more you involve the other departments in ahead of time, then they'll, especially if you're doing a project, we don't have a lot of money, it may take us 5 years to do this. But if that person's invested with the idea of it and that we're all working together, then there's a stronger possibility that when you call them a year from now, say, we still don't have much money, but we're doing this really great scene. You remember from the film that we're blah, blah, blah. They'll have more to feel about, I am part of this team and I'll keep going with them. So.
Yeah, I think the more you talk to the sound department about different aspects of your film, the more ideas they'll have for you about what they can do. So yeah, just having that conversation of, hey, what about this scene? Would you have any suggestions? Especially if it's, oh, we're shooting in a difficult space, like acoustically or for sound because of background noise or something. Then, they will probably have lots of good ideas, things that don't cost you any extra money or aren't really that much of a hassle, that would save you a lot of time and money in post. So yeah, just starting that dialogue, I think you get a lot from it.
Can I also add on to talk about wardrobe, in the fact that if in pre-production you can actually avoid polyester and any other noise-making necklaces and high heels, all of that stuff.
Yeah, I was just on a feature. My girlfriend's sitting here and she's in wardrobe, and we worked on a feature together, and it was really nice to be able to be like, hey, let's build pockets. Like, these people are wearing the same clothes this entire feature. Let's just build pockets and wire the mic through. So it's literally they're putting on their jacket, their mic is on. That was really, really fun. We built like a pocket. Not that you really need to, but they were like running around the woods and like getting all dirty and stuff. So like building a pocket on the bra was really cool. I couldn't have done that by myself. Thanks, wardrobe.
I think on doc stuff, especially, you don't necessarily have a chance to intervene if it's like a one-shot interview and kind of thing. But when you see the person come in and you see that they're wearing 10 necklaces, 20 bangles, big earrings, that you might start talking to them. Is it possible that you can remove things? And sometimes it's a negotiation because, oh, no, these bracelets are really important to me. And then you might have to tape them down or something like that. So.
Yeah, but make sure if it's wardrobe stuff like that, do it first thing, because once they're on camera and they're wearing all the bangles and everything, then it's a continuity issue, and suddenly we can't do anything about it. So yeah, just like make sure you do it first thing.
Thank you. So I actually have two more questions. The first is sort of related to props, loud and noisy props like keys, et cetera, that get used throughout scenes, especially in narrative work. So do you guys have any alternatives or any sort of suggestions to minimize the noise caused by those items, especially when they're being used throughout dialogue or over under dialogue?
Are the props part of the scene? Yeah. Then I like them. I don't want to do that in post. It's something that I would have to add in post. Like it adds so much to a scene, change jingling in a pocket, keys dangling when going for a door or something like that. So if it's actually in the scene and it's not just like this talent has their extra house keys in their back pocket, I want it. I want the noise.
And sometimes you can coordinate with props too. Like for some things, there are quiet versions that exist, like paper bags and things like that they do make ones that don't make as much money or much noise, but they will cost more money. So props doesn't necessarily want to buy one and have it for you because it comes out of their budget. But that's a conversation you can have. And then if props says we don't have money for it, then you can talk to one of your producers or coordinators about it. So being aware of the things that do exist that can make your life easier. And then, but yeah, I guess if you see it in the scene and it's part of the scene and you see it in the shot, I don't really mind it as much. But yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the situation. Is it something that can be eliminated, or is it something that, can you, drop the keys on the counter in between your two sentences instead of doing it, on the line? It's really going to be a case-by-case basis with that kind of thing.
And then hopefully this is my last one. But when it comes to your reel and sort of showing clients your work, how do you go about doing that? Because especially as a location sound mixer, as opposed to post sound, how do you showcase that?
I don't have a reel. It's really hard for sound to have a reel. I mean, I guess there are highlight moments of things that I've done that I would like to showcase, but people are like, I don't even know what what am I hearing? Like, am I supposed to be listening for something specific? It's really, really hard to showcase that. So I just send, I send short films. I don't know. That would be a really hard, like, look at the design I did. And they're like, she looks like she's swimming. Cool. I don't know. Yeah. So.
Yeah, for production, I don't have a real, I have examples of my work on my website. But I think it's also funny because everything on my website has had so much done to it also, right? This isn't the raw sound that I recorded, but people will be like, oh, that's cool. And they'll be impressed and they'll hire you, so.
Yeah, like an Adidas commercial. They're like, oh, okay, I don't know if that needed sound at all.
I have two questions also. First question is, how do you handle when you are doing an interviewer and the person just decides to use a lot of hand gestures, and then you change the mic at least one time, but you can't continue to mess with the interview? Is it okay to just say to yourself, I'm going to rely on this boom? And then if that's the case, do you put that in your notes? Do you let the director know? Like, at what point do you just stop worrying about the fact that they're making all this noise?
Well, if the boom sounds great, then I don't worry about the lav. Because, I don't want to keep messing with someone just to have two good mics. If the boom sounds great, I won't mess with the lav. But if it's something that's also being picked up on the boom, like if someone's like slapping their thighs when they're talking and things like that, it's also going to be, you're going to have to like read the room. Like if it's a really nervous person being interviewed and you calling attention to it is going to make it worse and make them more uncomfortable. Yeah, so sometimes that's a bit difficult, that you have to kind of gauge, like, for yourself, like, how bad is it? Do I really need to mention and have them stop doing that? But, like, sometimes people are just wearing, like, a really, noisy piece of clothing, so you hear every single movement that they're making. And I don't feel bad about asking people to limit gestures a bit, or okay, do ones that aren't so bad, but don't slap your hand against your leg when you're talking. But it's definitely, you kind of have to feel it out in the situation, and who gauge, can I give this person this note, or are they going to take it badly, or am I going to make them more nervous? I don't know. It is kind of a difficult one, gauging that kind of thing.
You can also whisper to the director, and then say, the person's slapping their thigh all the time. And then some directors will say, stop slapping your thigh.
Yeah.
But
my second question is, I have the 633 and I have the Wingman, the app. And we keep talking about sound reports. Can you just list everything that really should go into a sound report?
The sound report will generate, I guess it depends on like what type of project you're on, but the sound report should generate all the metadata. So each track, left, right, then track 1, track 2, track 3. If you've labeled them the way that I label them, it's track 1 and it just says boom instead of track 1. So it'll say boom, and then lav 1 or lav girl's name, lav 2 boy's name, whatever it is. So the sound report will lay that out, and then it'll also go take by take, and it'll introduce or say your notes. So if it's good or not good, there is like a phrase thing on the 633 that you can do like a quick note, G and G, plain, if that's one of your things, or whatever it is, the sound report will say that for each take.
If there is a point that there's a plane or a sound, but it's repeated, is it necessary to write it in the notes? Like the line is repeated, and so it's kind of like taken care of.
I do. I get it. Like I said, it depends on the type of project that you're on. If it's, I do. I usually write like plane, but we had it in another take.
Okay.
We had it in take 5. You know what I mean?
And then you mentioned that we should write every single lav that we're using, all the different mics that we use for the lavs as well. That should be in the sound report.
I would. Or the way I do it is just to make my life easier. It's lav 1, lav 2, lav 3. And then on my cover sheet, the thing that gets sent to everyone on production, it'll get sent to your editor, your director. Everyone knows from this cover sheet that lav 1 was Annabelle and lav 2 was Jason. and it keeps everyone clear.
So when that report is generated, when you download the memory card, you know how we have to label the person's name as we do in the channels. Will that come up on their side?
From the sound report?
Yeah.
You should. I guess it all depends. I'm not a video editor. I don't know what programs people are using, but I do believe that there is a way to retrieve all the metadata. Sometimes when people put it in their projects, though, it renames everything. So I couldn't tell you that. But yes, if they are working in a workflow that they want that meta, yes, they should be able to.
So either way, repeat it twice, put it in the cover sheet, and then put it on the thing.
And then like tattoo it on your face and like all of it. Like just as much information as possible and say it over and over and over and over. Yeah.
JT, anything to say about notes? Because I know you take a lot.
I take notes and then I email it at the end of each day to the producer director and whoever else they want, and it includes the recorder, all the tracks, what our relationship was to the cameras in terms of time code and things like that. The takes, the ones that had problem, where the wild track is and stuff like that.
Thank you.
All right, 2 more questions.
Yeah, so I'm really curious to know, like, I guess how you guys use like radios versus like booms, and like how much you rely on the lavs, or if a boom is like really good, but like do you still want that coverage? Like, what's your relationship with like radios versus like booms or overheads?
Well, for narrative, your boom is king. Everything always sounds better on the boom. So I try to get everything on the boom if possible. But my preference is also to wire every character. Just like the kind of productions that I work on, things are constantly in flux. Coverage, they get rid of coverage that they promise you and this and that. So having the wires, I just feel is a nice backup. But yeah, I never like to only have something on the wire for narrative.
For documentary, you should always double mic. So, because all it takes is one emotional moment where the person goes, and then you don't want to lose that. And I've heard sound editors tell me that they like in post to mix those tracks sometimes, so that there's a little perspective. All right, some sound editors.
I thought you meant like at the same time.
No.
Okay.
Tell us how you really feel, Ash.
Because the radio mic always sounds like it's in the person's stomach, right? And the boom gives you some sense of the room. So,
I do. I was like with HGTV, and we ran with just lavs. Boom is there. It's there, and like do your best, but like the coverage is crazy because you can't control talent, and the host is walking around this gigantic space like this, and then all of a sudden they're back there, and I'm like, oh. So it's like lavs, and just make sure they're good lavs. I use the B6 lavs a lot.
Break often?
Yeah, all the time. One time I was like listening and I was like, what the hell is going on? And I looked over and the talent is rolling around in the sand with like a B6 lav on, and it completely destroyed it because the cables are so thin. And the sturdiest ones are like Coast 11s, but like I don't like the way they sound. So B6 and the DPA, discrete lavs, are dope. I like those.
Myself, I like Cost 11s.
No.
Last question.
Oh. Hi, it's actually a follow-up on what we were just talking about just right, so it's a great segue, is coloring of sound, deciding what boom you like, and deciding what lav will go well with that boom. Can you talk a little bit about the color of sound and your selection?
A lot of narrative stuff that I do, I use the MKH kind of series or whatever you'd like to call it. I like the intimate sound of the 50. The MKH 50 sounds so good in narrative. I know that everyone has their own opinions. And then some people are like, the Cement, whatever, the Blue mic, whatever. They're great. But I would either go with the MKH series for like a narrative thing, because you got the 50, the 60, and the 70. And then you can pair some, Coast 11 goes good with it. But, or the like 4017 DPA mic with the DPA discrete lavs are really good. And the Cement kind of, I don't know. It's a great mic. But like for this like intimate feeling, I really love the MKH50. It just, I don't know, it sounds so warm. It sounds nice.
Yeah, I second that. I try to do everything on the 50 for narrative. Everything I can get away with. Even if it's a wider shot, I still like hold off switching to a different mic because I love the 50.
The 60 sounds really good. No?
Oh, I've never used the 60. I have a CMIT if I switched to something else. So
The 60 is basically the same thing, just longer range.
yeah.
I don't know, I like it. And then the 70 is even longer. So cool.
Well, I have the Sanken CS3E if I want to switch to something like really long. But yeah, it doesn't sound as warm or as full, but you get a lot of range out of it, especially if you're like outside.
CS3E is super wide. I'll use that like if I'm interviewing like two people and they're like, we don't have money for two booms. Or like, why would I put two booms for people sitting in chairs? So I'll use a CS3E and because it's pretty wide. Nerds.
I think in terms of determining what you like, places like this will allow you to listen to different mics so you can have a sense of it. And then you should use different ones, especially on student or very starting out films. So after a while, because you can only tell after a while when you're working with something whether you like that tone. And a lot of it is, do I like the tone of that mic? Does it seem to match what I think I'm hearing? And then finally, when you actually, because I know you're going to first start probably buying used, and then you'll work your way up. But along the way, you can get other mics, because actually, at least in doc mode, we'll have several different kinds of mics, because like I'm the blue mic person, but in terrible situations of rain, dust, and all that, the Sennheiser seems to survive. So you might have to take that out for that particular setup. So
yeah. Also, if you're using a mic a lot, you're gonna like it because you're listening to it a lot. So also, there's a lot of just personal bias in microphones. You use one for a while. If you switch to another one, you're just not gonna like it as much probably, just because what you're used to. So.
Let's actually finish with Monica and then. You're welcome.
Hi. So I have a question about this is for production or for post. What are the things when you're starting a new project or working with a new production company? What is the information that you want to have, and who are you communicating with to get that information?
For post, I would like a locked cut. And I need to just speak with the editor. I mean, editors first, you're just like relaying all the information that you need from them. Hey, I need an OMF, 6-second handles or 10-second handles, whatever you need from them. And then if you have like these extra wild tracks, hopefully they're sending them over to, you're just communicating to the editor everything that you need. And then the next person is director's notes and stuff like that. But locked cut is first.
production, hopefully you're having a discussion ahead of time. So you have the idea of the kind of film, the style that they're shooting in, how many cameras are they going to use, or what are they expecting to happen on each camera, where does sound have to be fed or not, and what else besides the interviews are you going to have to do, and how they want, ideally, and I try to tell everyone, have a good spec sheet on what you want from production so that there's no questions, because I have been on shoots where everyone has been around for a long time, and then you get to the set and they go, well, we know we said 24 frames per second. Isn't that what we're doing? So, I mean, you want to have all that cleared up right at the beginning. So.
I guess specifically for narrative, I want to read the script first and foremost, or I want to know as much as I can about the locations, and going on a scout if I can. I want to know same kind of things, like what camera are we shooting on, how are we dealing with sync, those kinds of things. And then also extending to wardrobe. I want them to send me pictures of all the wardrobe, so that then I can see, oh, there's that horrible track jacket. Like, I'm not going to like that. Can we switch that out for something else? Or, those kinds of things. Just trying to get, and then if in the script, if you see anything that might be kind of like a special sound thing, like, oh, there's a music performance. Do you want to record that live? Are we going to record a track that we're going to do playback for, or those kinds of things. If you just kind of highlighting red flagging anything that's like, oh, that needs to be like a more in-depth discussion. How are we going to deal with that? Oh, there's characters that are listening to music in the car and they're singing along to it. Does that mean we need to rent earwigs? How do you want to deal with each of these kinds of things?
Well, there's going to be a lot more time to ask your questions while we drink at Sunswick. I learned a lot. Did you guys learn a lot? Yeah.
Please give another round of applause for our panelists.
Can I just add one more thing? I believe in sound blankets, so whenever you can have them on set, to throw them on the floor or hang them up, because really, just even throwing one on the floor is going to make a huge difference to your interviews.
Sound blankets.
And we have some extra thank yous to people, in addition to Gotham Sound, who helped organize this: Mike Snope, Avantika Nimbacher, Emily Strong, and Miel Ezra. So thanks.
Thank you.
And for those of you who came late, we are going to do the drinks at Sunswick on 35th Street, 35th Avenue, and we will be handing out tickets at the front.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.